I used to think the cruelest words just broke your heart until a single sentence swallowed my entire home. He said the letters GF like a joke in front of our friends. But 72 hours later, I discovered it was actually a calculated heist. By the time I understood what he really meant, I was no longer his wife. I had become the person who slams the final door. My name is Harper Caldwell, and at 38 years old, I lived my life by checklists and audit trails. I believed that if you managed the variables, you could control the outcome. Tonight was supposed to be a controlled variable, a celebratory dinner at my home in Columbus, Ohio, to honor the engagement of my best friend, Tessa Linwood, and her fiancé, Graham Pierce. The roast was perfect, the wine was breathing, and the lighting was dim and intimate. But beneath the warmth, there was a static charge in the air, a tension that radiated entirely from my husband, Miles Rourke. Miles was on his fourth glass of Cabernet. His face was flushed, and his posture was too loose, too sprawling. He was dominating the conversation, interrupting Graham's story about the proposal to talk about his own vague consulting victories. But it was his eyes that bothered me. He kept looking at Tessa. He was not looking at her like a friend. He was looking at her with a wet, predatory fixity that made my stomach turn. He swirled his wine, cutting Graham off mid-sentence. "That's cute, buddy. Really. But you haven't seen the real game yet," Miles said, his voice loud enough to rattle the crystal. He smirked, looking around the table as if he were holding court. Then he dropped the bomb. "Dinner was cute now, I'm dating my GF." He threw the acronym out like a casual grenade, then glanced at me, his eyebrows raised. He was waiting for me to be the cool wife. He was waiting for me to laugh, to smooth it over, to validate his humiliation of me as just another quirky joke. The silence that followed hit the room like a car crash. It was absolute. Tessa went chalk white, her eyes darting down to her plate. Graham froze, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the table edge. I did not scream. I did not ask him what he meant. I simply lowered my fork to my plate. Clink. The sound was sharp and final, like the hammer of a gun falling on an empty chamber. I stood up. I did not say a word. I turned on my heel and walked out of the dining room, down the hall, and into the master bedroom. I moved with the efficiency of a machine. I pulled the large suitcase from the closet shelf and threw it onto the bed. I did not fold anything. I opened his drawers and scooped up armfuls of clothes shirts, socks, underwear, and shoved them into the bag. I went to the bathroom and swept his toiletries into the side pocket. I was not crying. I was not shaking. I was just taking out the trash. I heard heavy footsteps behind me. Miles stood in the doorway, the smirk gone, replaced by a dark, dangerous confusion. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Embarrassing me in front of them. You are going to regret this." I did not look at him. I zipped the suitcase shut with a violent rip of sound. I grabbed the handle and wheeled it straight at him, forcing him to stumble back into the hallway. I marched the bag into the living room, past the stunned silence of the dinner table, and shoved it toward the front door. "Get out!" My voice was steady. It was not a question. Miles stepped forward, his face twisting. He reached out as if to grab my shoulder, his fingers curled in a threat. "You're crazy." I was just joking. "You always take things so—" Graham was there in a second. He stepped between us, blocking Miles's path to me. Graham was not a violent man, but tonight he looked like a wall of granite. Miles looked around the room, realizing for the first time that the dynamic had shifted. He had lost his audience. He wasn't the charming protagonist anymore. He was just a drunk man being evicted from his own home. Miles sneered, his mask of sophistication slipping entirely. He snatched the handle of his suitcase. He opened the door, but before he stepped out, he turned back. He did not look at me. He looked straight at Tessa, who was trembling in her seat. Tessa isn't the angel you think she is." "Harper." He planted the seed of poison with a cruel grin, then walked out into the darkness. I slammed the door. I turned the deadbolt, then the handle lock, then the security chain. 3 distinct clicks. I leaned my back against the wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. I did not feel heartbroken. I did not feel free. I felt a terrifying, echoing void, as if the power to my entire life had just been cut. The silence in the house was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. I stood in the hallway, staring at the scratches the suitcase wheels had left on the hardwood floor. My mind, usually a pristine grid of schedules and risk assessments, began to replay the last 18 months of my marriage. It was like watching a corrupted video file finally resolve into high definition. Miles called himself a consultant. It was a perfect title for a man whose income was as volatile as his temper. He never explained exactly who he was consulting for, offering only vague, sophisticated-sounding explanations about supply chains and logistics. In contrast, I was the operations manager at Northgate Regulatory Solutions. My life was built on checklists, audit trails, and absolute predictability. For a long time, I thought our differences were complementary. I provided the foundation, he provided the flair. I was wrong. He had weaponized my stability against me. I remembered a Tuesday night 3 weeks ago. I had been exhausted after a compliance review, wearing sweatpants and reviewing a spreadsheet on the couch. Miles had looked at me, a glass of scotch in his hand, and sighed. "You know, Harper, sometimes you're so functional," he had said, the word dripping with disdain. "Look at Tessa. Tessa is always radiant. She has this energy. Men need inspiration. Harper, not just maintenance." At the time, I had felt a spike of shame. I had gone to the bathroom, brushed my hair, and applied expensive night cream, trying to fix a defect I did not know I had. Now, standing alone in my living room, the memory made my skin crawl. He had been training me. He had been conditioning me to accept crumbs of affection while he slowly eroded my confidence. That erosion went deeper than just insults. It was administrative. "Let me handle the bills." "Babe," he would say, taking the mail from my hands with a gentle, patronizing smile. "You work so hard." "You shouldn't have to worry about the boring stuff." It had sounded like a kindness. I realized now it was a siege. He held the passwords to the electric bill, the water, the tax portal. He kept the key to the filing cabinet on his personal key ring. He had turned my own home into a black box where I was just a passenger, blind to the mechanics of our life. My phone buzzed on the counter, shattering my thoughts. It was a text from my cousin Renee Caldwell. Renee did not do subtlety. "Do not let him back in, not even for a toothbrush. Check everything tonight. Money, locks, windows. He is dangerous." Renee was right. The sadness I expected to feel was absent. In its place was the cold, hard hum of survival instinct. I began to move through the house, not as a wife, but as a security guard. I checked the front door, locked. I checked the back slider, locked. I checked the windows in the guest room, latched. My home did not feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a fortress I had to defend. I walked into the home office. This was supposed to be our shared space, but Miles had gradually claimed it, filling it with his monitors and his locked drawers. I approached the tall, steel filing cabinet in the corner. This was where we kept the deeds, the birth certificates, the insurance policies. I pulled the handle. It held fast. I tried to jiggle it, hoping the latch was loose. It was solid. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked the back of my neck. The key. The small brass key to this cabinet was on Miles's main keyring, the same keyring that was currently in his pocket. Miles away from here. I stared at the metal drawer. Why would he need to lock away house deeds and marriage certificates from his own wife? And then the phrase he had said at dinner echoed in my head, stripped of its cruel humor. Now I'm dating my GF. He had said it with a smirk, but also with a strange, arrogant precision. Miles was a man of schemes, a man who loved insider language. GF. Was it really just girlfriend, or was it something else in my line of work? We looked for patterns. We looked for codes. I realized with a sick drop in my stomach that GF might not be a person. It sounded like an acronym for a project. It sounded like a file name. It sounded like a heist. The next morning, the doorbell rang at 7 o'clock sharp. When I opened it, Tessa was standing on the porch. She looked wrecked. Her eyes were swollen, and she was wearing the same clothes from the night before, hidden under a large trench coat. She did not say hello. She simply collapsed into my arms, shaking violently. I didn't know how to tell you, Tessa sobbed, her voice muffled against my shoulder. I was so scared it would ruin the wedding. I was so scared you wouldn't believe me. We sat at the kitchen island. Tessa placed her phone on the marble counter with a trembling hand. She opened her messages and slid the device toward me. The contact name was saved as Do Not Answer. I scrolled. It was a one-way barrage of manipulation. Miles had been messaging her for months. Harper is dead weight. She's so boring. Tessa, she drains me. You're the only one who gets the real me. Just give me a sign. One nod, and I leave her tonight. I read the words with a detachment that frightened me. He was painting me as a gray, joyless burden to justify his pursuit of my best friend, but then my thumb froze on a message sent just 2 days ago. GF is ready. After dinner, we move. I read it again. GF is ready. Tessa, I asked, my voice steady. Did he ever explain what GF meant in this context, because this doesn't read like a pet name? This reads like instructions. I don't know, Tessa whispered, wiping her nose with a tissue. He just kept saying everything was set. He said he had a parachute. I pulled out my own phone and dialed Renee. She answered on the first ring. I put her on speaker and explained the text thread. Secure that data, Renee commanded, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Don't just screenshot it. Export the chat logs. Save them to a brand new cloud account that Miles doesn't know exists. Then print every single page. We are making a physical binder, if his phone accidentally gets wiped remotely. We need paper. I spent the next 2 hours turning my dining table into a war room. While the printer churned out page after page of evidence, I called a locksmith. I did not ask for a quote. I told him to come immediately and replace every cylinder in the house. I also ordered a high-definition doorbell camera and 2 motion sensors for the driveway. I was done relying on trust. I was switching to surveillance. At noon, my phone buzzed. It was Miles, coming by at 12:30 to pick up some paperwork in the fireproof safe. Don't make this difficult. He did not want his clothes. He did not want his toiletries. He wanted the safe. The safe contained our passports, deeds, and financial records. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the text, emailed it to my secret account, and forwarded it to Renee. 10 minutes later, Graham called. Harper, Graham said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. I need to tell you something. I didn't want to say it last night because, well, because it's sick. Tell me, I said. I was at the Rusty Anchor a month ago. Miles was there with some guy I didn't know. He didn't see me. I heard him making a bet. He put $500 on the table and said he would lock down Tessa before the wedding. Graham paused, and I could hear him breathing hard on the other end. He said, breaking Harper is just the stepping stone. You have to clear the lot before you build the mansion. He wasn't talking about love. Harper. He sounded like he was acquiring an asset. I hung up the phone and looked at the stack of printed texts. The picture was snapping into focus. The public humiliation at dinner, the relentless targeting of Tessa, the immediate demand for the fireproof safe, the cryptic text about GF being ready. This was not an impulsive affair. This was a campaign. Miles was not just leaving me. He was executing a strategy he had been planning for months. He viewed us all as pieces on a board. He thought he was playing chess while we were playing house. I looked at the locked filing cabinet in the corner. Miles thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought I was just the boring wife who followed rules. Fine, I said to the empty room. If you want a paper trail, Miles, I will give you one. I was going to make him trip over his own paperwork. I sat in the office of Sloane Merritt, a matrimonial attorney who had been recommended to me as a shark in a silk blouse. Her office was cold, smelling of old paper and expensive espresso. She did not offer me a tissue. She did not ask me how I was feeling. She simply spread my financial statements across her mahogany desk like a deck of cards. Emotions make people stupid. Harper, Sloane said, her voice dry and crisp. They make you hesitate. They make you forgive. We are not here for closure. We are here for arithmetic. Money tells the truth. She tapped a long, manicured fingernail on a line item in our joint checking account. Look here. The withdrawals start small. $200 at a boutique hotel in Cincinnati. $150 at a steakhouse on a Tuesday. $300 at a luxury gift shop. She looked up at me, her eyes devoid of pity. He is not just cheating on you. He is funding his bachelor lifestyle with your paycheck. I felt a wave of nausea, but Sloane was already moving on. She pulled up a credit report on her large monitor and spun the screen toward me. This is the problem, she said. A home equity line of credit. It was opened 6 months ago against your house. The limit is $150,000. My mouth went dry. What we don't have a line of credit. I never signed for that. Sloane sighed, the sound of a professional dealing with a predictable disaster. You live in the digital age. Harper, digital notary services, a copy of your driver's license, access to your email for verification codes. That is all it takes to create a signature. She pointed to the balance column. He has drawn down almost the entire amount. $142,000. Gone. Where I whispered, my voice trembling. Where did it go? Sloane pointed to the transfer recipient. It was a business entity. GF Ledger Holdings, LLC. The letters leaped off the screen. GF. At dinner, he had thrown it in my face like a taunt. Now I'm dating my GF. I had thought he meant a woman. I had thought he was just being cruel. But looking at the screen, I realized the cruelty was secondary to the crime. It's a shell company, Sloane explained, registered to a rented mailbox in Nevada. He is moving your equity into a hiding spot. She sat back and clasped her hands. Here is the war plan. You leave this office and go straight to the bank. You open a new account in your name only. You transfer exactly 50% of whatever is left in the joint accounts. Not a penny more, not a penny less. If you take it all, a judge will see you as vindictive. If you take half, you are simply preserving marital assets. Then, she continued, listing the steps on her fingers, you freeze your credit. You place a fraud alert on your Social Security number. We prepare a police report for identity theft regarding the loan. And most importantly, she leaned forward, her gaze intense. You do not confront him. You do not scream. You do not tell him you know about the money. Let him think he is the smartest man in the room. If he thinks he is winning, he will get sloppy. If he knows you are hunting him, he will destroy the evidence. I nodded, feeling a cold resolve settle over me. The weeping wife was gone. The operations manager was back online. I understand, I said. Good, Sloane said. Start a log. Every text, every call, every time he drives past the house. Document it all with timestamps. Treat your life like an audit. I walked out of her office and into the bright sunlight, but the world looked different. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note file. I typed the date and time. Then I typed my first entry, 1:15 p.m. Discovery of unauthorized HELOC transfer to GF Ledger Holdings. I thought about his text message from earlier. GF is ready. He wasn't talking about a girlfriend packing a suitcase. He was talking about the money. He was talking about the heist. He wanted the safe because the papers inside would lead me to this LLC. I got into my car and locked the doors. Miles thought he had broken my heart. He had no idea he had just handed me the audit of a lifetime. By 6 o'clock that evening, my phone was lighting up like a frantic neon sign. Notifications were pouring in from Facebook and Instagram. Miles had gone public. I opened the app and saw a black and white photo of him looking out a window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His head bowed in performed sorrow. The caption was a masterpiece of vague victimhood. Sometimes you have to walk away to save your soul. It hurts when the person you supported turns out to be unstable. I tried to be the rock, but the toxicity was drowning me. Don't let bitter single friends whisper poison in your ear. I'm choosing peace. My blood boiled. I wanted to type a furious reply. I wanted to post the screenshots of his texts to Tessa. I wanted to scream the truth in the comments section. But then Sloane's voice cut through the red haze in my mind. Don't fight in the market. Fight in court. I put the phone down. I did not like, comment, or share. Instead, I sent a group text to our core circle of mutual friends, the people who had been at the dinner, plus a few others Miles was likely lobbying. Come over at 8. I have something to show you. When they arrived, the mood in my living room was awkward. They were expecting a crying session or a shouting match. They were expecting drama. Instead, I gave them a board meeting. I had cleared the coffee table. There were no snacks, no wine, no music, just 2 neat stacks of paper. I am not here to badmouth Miles. I said, my voice calm and leveled. I am here to correct the record regarding the timeline of events. Please, read this first. I nodded to Tessa. She looked terrified, but she stepped forward and picked up the first stack, the printed copies of the text messages. She handed them out to our friends without a word. The room went silent as they read. I watched their faces change. Confusion turned to shock, and shock turned to disgust. They read the dates. They saw the relentless pursuit, the mockery of our marriage, and the cold calculation of the GF is ready text. He told us you kicked him out because you were jealous of a joke, one friend whispered, looking up from the paper. It wasn't a joke. I said, it was an exit strategy. Now, please look at the second document. I placed the financial records on the table. This is a home equity line of credit taken out against this house 6 months ago for $150,000. I did not sign for it. The signature was digitally forged. I pointed to the transfer logs. And this is where the money went. A shell company called GF Ledger Holdings. He didn't just leave a marriage. He liquidated it before he walked out the door. The silence in the room shifted. It was no longer the awkward silence of a social dispute. It was the chilling silence of witnessing a crime. Ben, a guy who had known Miles since college, suddenly looked pale. He rubbed the back of his neck, staring at the floor. God! That makes sense now, Ben muttered. A few weeks ago, Miles was talking about investment strategies. He said, sometimes you have to cut the anchor if you want the boat to move fast. I thought he was talking about stocks. I didn't realize. He looked at me, his eyes wide. I didn't realize the anchor was you. I nodded slowly. There is an active fraud investigation, and my lawyers are handling the forensic accounting. I am telling you this so you aren't used as pawns in his narrative. You can believe whatever you want, but the bank statements don't lie. By framing it as a legal issue rather than a romantic one, I stripped Miles of his power. Rumors feed on emotion, but they die in the face of litigation. As the friends began to apologize, murmuring their support, I glanced over at Tessa. She was hugging herself, looking relieved that the truth was out. But then I remembered Miles's parting shot at the door. Tessa isn't the angel you think she is. I watched her carefully. There was relief in her eyes. Yes, but beneath it, there was something else. A flicker of genuine, deep-seated fear that had nothing to do with the text messages. "Tessa," I asked softly, "are you okay? I'm just glad it's over," she stammered, her voice breathless. "He's crazy, Harper. We just need to stay away from him." She was trembling. It was subtle, but I saw it. Miles was a liar, but he was also a man who hoarded leverage. If he said he had dirt on Tessa, he probably did. I realized then that while I was winning the battle for the narrative, there were still landmines buried in the field. I turned back to the group. "Thank you for coming. Please, let him post whatever he wants." "The more he talks, the more evidence he gives me. I had chosen my strategy. I would be the statue. Let the pigeon do the work of dirtying itself." The next morning, the war followed me to work. I was summoned to the Human Resources office at 9 o'clock. My boss, the director of HR, sat behind her desk with a grim expression. She slid a printed email across the surface. "We received an anonymous whistleblower complaint at 3 in the morning," she said quietly. "It accuses you of embezzling funds through vendor variance manipulation." I picked up the paper. The language was trying too hard. It was filled with buzzwords that sounded impressive to an outsider but made no sense to an actual auditor. Flow-through discrepancies, ledger opacity. It was the way Miles spoke when he was trying to intimidate a waiter or a mechanic. "This is not a whistleblower," I said, placing the paper back on the desk. "This is retaliation." The director nodded. She tapped her keyboard and turned her monitor toward me. Our IT security team ran a trace on the sender. They used a VPN to mask their location, but the connection dropped for a split second during the transmission. We caught the real IP address. She pointed to the location on the map. "It resolves to a residential address in the suburbs. Specifically, the home of a Martha Rourke." I felt a cold flash of anger. Martha Rourke was Miles's mother. He was sitting in his childhood bedroom, using his mother's Wi-Fi to try and destroy my career. "I have an active fraud investigation open against my estranged husband," I said, pulling the draft of the police report from my bag. "My internal audits are clean as a scalpel. You know that. This is an attempt to leverage my employment to force a settlement." The director looked at the police report, then back at me. "We know your work, Harper. We are not launching an inquiry. In fact, it has already blocked his address." "But you needed to see this." I walked back to my desk and forwarded the evidence to Sloan. Her reply came within 5 minutes. "Tortious interference and defamation." He just added another 0 to the settlement check. "Keep working." Later that afternoon, Graham called me. He sounded out of breath. "Harper. He's getting desperate. He just texted me. He offered me $10,000. What I asked, gripping the phone, he said if I could get Tessa to retract her statement about the harassment, he would cut me a check as soon as he sells your house. He said, "I'll split the equity with you. Easy money." "He can't sell the house," I said, my voice hard. "He doesn't own the equity anymore. He stole it." I hung up and stared at my office wall. Miles was operating on a frantic timeline. He needed to sell the house to cover the debt he had created, or perhaps to pay off whoever was helping him with the shell company. He was flailing. I left work early and stopped at a hardware store. I did not go home to cry. I went home to fortify. I installed motion sensor floodlights above the garage and reinforced the strike plates on the front door with 3-inch screws. It was not paranoia. It was risk management. That night, I sat down to analyze the fake contract attached to the anonymous email Miles had sent to HR. It was a crude forgery, a document claiming I had authorized a vendor kickback. But as I zoomed in on the signature line, my breath hitched. The signature was mine. It was not a rough approximation. It was a pixel-perfect match of my handwriting. But the pressure points were wrong for a pen on paper. It looked smooth. Digital. I closed my eyes, searching my memory. 2 months ago, Miles had asked me to sign a waiver on his iPad for a gym membership he wanted to join. Just a quick signature. Babe, so I can get the spouse discount, he had said. I opened my laptop and overlaid the signature from the fake contract with the memory of that iPad signing. It was identical. He had captured my signature digitally, isolated it, and was now pasting it onto incriminating documents. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty window. GF was not just a hiding place for money. GF was a system. He had been building a library of my credentials, my passwords, my security questions, my digital signature for months. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to frame me. The phone rang at 7 in the evening. The caller ID displayed Dean Rourke. My stomach tightened. I expected a lecture, a guilt trip, or a plea to take back his wayward son. I answered with my finger hovering over the record button. Harper, Dean said. His voice sounded thin, like paper that had been crumpled and smoothed out too many times. Are you safe? The question threw me off balance. I am, I replied cautiously. Why? Because he is at our house, Dean said, his voice lowering to a whisper. He is screaming at his mother because the internet is cut. He is blaming everyone but himself. There was a long pause, filled with the static of a bad connection. We are done, Harper. For 10 years, we have been cleaning up his messes. The gambling debts in Vegas. The failed startup in Austin that didn't actually exist. We paid the loan sharks so they wouldn't break his legs. We let him play the big shot consultant while we paid his credit card bills. I leaned against the kitchen counter, stunned. Miles had always presented his family as wealthy but distant benefactors. I realized now they were just hostages to his incompetence. I am sending you an affidavit, Dean continued. I will list every loan, every bailout, and every lie. You can use it in court. I just want him to stop destroying people. Thank you, Dean, I said softly. That means everything to me. Be careful. Harper, Dean added, his voice trembling. He forged his mother's signature on a property deed 5 years ago. We didn't press charges then. We should have. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the connection to the fake contract from work suddenly glaringly obvious. This was not a new skill for Miles. It was a practiced habit. I turned to Tessa, who was sitting on my couch, nursing a mug of tea. She had been staying in the guest room since the truth came out, afraid to go back to her apartment in case Miles was waiting. Tessa, I said, sitting down opposite her, Dean just told me Miles forged his mother's signature. I need you to think. Is there anything else, any name, any detail you were too scared to mention? Tessa looked down at her hands. The GF thing. She started, her voice barely a whisper. It's not just a text code. I met her. My spine stiffened. You met who? Giselle Frost, Tessa said. About 2 months ago. Miles took me to a lunch in the city. He introduced us. He called her his business partner, but he was holding her hand under the table. She was cold. She didn't talk like a mistress. She talked like an accountant. She kept asking about your schedule. She wanted to know when you would be out of town for audits. Giselle Frost. GF. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the bank transfer records. GF Ledger Holdings, LLC. It was staring me in the face. It wasn't an abstract company. It was a person. Giselle Frost was likely the one laundering the money, or at least the one whose name was on the paperwork to bypass the conflict of interest checks. Tessa, I said firmly, I am not angry at you, but from this moment on, there are no secrets. Miles survives in the gaps of information we don't share. If we close the gaps, he suffocates. Tessa nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise, no more secrets. I called Sloan immediately. We spent the next hour building a witness list that looked less like a divorce proceeding and more like a RICO case. We had the HR director, the IT security logs, Graham, Tessa, Dean's affidavit, the locksmith, and the bank records. I found something else. I told Sloan as I clicked through the deeper layers of the bank transfer that evening. Under the GF Ledger Holdings account, there is a sub-account. It was opened yesterday. The account name was GF Escrow. "He is moving the money again," Sloan said, her voice sharp. "Escrow means he is preparing for a large transaction. He is trying to wash the money through a property purchase or a foreign transfer." I looked at the screen. The balance in the escrow account was 0, but the status was pending inbound wire. "He hasn't moved it yet," I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "He is waiting for the sale of the house. He needs the equity from this place to fill that account before he runs." I realized then that I did not need to scream at Miles. I did not need to make him feel bad. I just needed to be a better auditor than he was a criminal. I needed to lock the doors, not just to my house, but to his entire financial existence. I sat at my desk with the cold focus of a forensic accountant. I dug through the archives of my email, searching for every document I had ever signed electronically at Miles's request. It did not take long. I found an email from 11 months ago with the subject line "Insurance Premium Drop. Sign ASAP." I opened the attachment. It was a generic form, supposedly to lower our car insurance rate. At the bottom, my signature was scrawled in blue digital ink. I took a screenshot and sent it to Sloan. She overlaid it with the signature on the fraudulent loan documents. "It is a match," Sloan confirmed over the phone. "Down to the pixel. He didn't forge your signature. Harper. He cloned it. This is identity theft." I hung up and turned my attention to the physical room. If he had hidden the digital trail, he must have hidden the physical one too. I began to tear the office apart. I pulled books off the shelves and shook out the magazines. I felt behind the drawers. Finally, I found it. Tucked inside the back cover of a thick leather notebook was a folded document. It was a real estate listing agreement. I unfolded the paper. My name was forged at the bottom next to his. In the margins, Miles had written a note in red ink, "Cash buyers only. Must close before the 1st. He was selling the house. He was selling my house from under my feet while I was still sleeping in it. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a local number I did not recognize. I answered. "Hi. Is this Harper?" a male voice asked, sounding professionally upbeat. "This is Derek Halston from Century Realty. Miles told me to give you a heads up. I have a cash buyer who wants to see the property today at 4 o'clock. I know it is short notice, but since you guys are moving to Arizona next week, I figured you would want to get this done." "Arizona?" He had told them we were moving to Arizona. "Derek," I said, my voice dropping to a register I usually reserved for failing audit reports. "The house is not for sale. I am not moving to Arizona. I am currently in the middle of a fraud investigation regarding the title of this home." There was a long, stunned silence on the other end. I don't understand," Derek stammered. "Miles signed the listing. He said you were just stressed about the pack-out. If you or any client steps foot on my property." I said, enunciating every word, "I will call the police for trespassing. I will then file a formal complaint with the state licensing board and have your license suspended for facilitating a fraudulent sale. Do you understand me?" "Whoa. Okay. Look." I didn't know Derek sounded frantic now. He just told me we had to close fast because GF was pushing for the liquidity. I thought GF was a bank. GF is not a bank. I said, "GF is the reason you are about to lose your job if you don't cancel this listing immediately." I hung up and called Sloan. "File the list pendants," I ordered. "Now." "Already done," Sloan replied. "I filed it 20 minutes ago electronically. It puts a giant red flag on the title. No title company in the country will insure a sale on that house. It is dead in the water." The reaction was immediate. Within 15 minutes, my phone began to buzz. It was Miles, calling from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called from a different number. Then another. A text message popped up. "Harper, please. We need to talk. Just coffee for 10 minutes. You don't understand what's at stake." I did not reply. I stared at the screen as he spiraled. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He was calling because his cash flow had just been severed. Then, a notification from my bank app pinged on my screen. I opened it. It was a security alert. Attempted wire transfer declined. Recipient GF escrow services. Amount $42,000. My blood ran cold. He had tried to drain the last of the accessible cash from a side account I hadn't frozen yet, trying to shove it into the escrow account before the walls closed in. I looked at the words GF escrow. I finally understood the full scope of the picture. GF wasn't just a mistress. GF wasn't just a partner. GF was a funnel. The woman, the LLC, the escrow account. They were all just components of a machine built to siphon my life's work into his pocket. Girlfriend was just the noise he made to distract me. The thing he was truly dating was a financial escape hatch, and I had just welded it shut. The courier arrived at 10 in the morning with a thick envelope. Miles had filed first. As I read the summons, I actually laughed out loud. It was a document of breathtaking audacity. He was asking for spousal support. He was asking for 70% of our marital assets. And, in a clause that made my jaw drop, he referred to the unauthorized home equity line of credit as a joint investment strategy based on a marital misunderstanding. Sloane did not laugh. She sat across from me, her face like stone. He is trying to normalize the fraud, Sloane said, tapping the paper. He wants to frame the theft as a bad business decision we made together. We are not going to let him. We began to assemble the counter-filing. It was not a defense. It was an indictment. We laid out the timeline of the digital forgery. We attached the evidence of his interference with my employer. We included the affidavit from Graham regarding the bribery attempt. Every time Miles tried to pivot, we had a document waiting to block him. By noon, my phone pinged with a notification from a friend. Miles was now posting on LinkedIn, of all places. He was vaguely alluding to unethical behavior by partners who sleep their way to the top. He was implying I was having an affair with my boss. Do not respond, Sloane warned, seeing my knuckles turn white. He wants a reaction. He wants to look like the heartbroken husband. Just screenshot it. I took the screenshot and added it to the folder marked defamation. I did not feel the urge to defend my honor. I just felt the satisfaction of adding another line item to his bill. Then came the email from Dean. It was the signed affidavit. It was a heartbreaking read, detailing a decade of bailouts and lies. But one paragraph stood out. Dean recounted a conversation where Miles had bragged about his philosophy on debt. Let the debt stay with the person who feels responsible. Dean quoted his son in the sworn statement. The money should follow the person who is smart enough to spend it. That is intent, Sloane said, highlighting the sentence in yellow. That proves premeditation. My cousin Renee called an hour later. She had been digging into Giselle Frost, Harper. You are not going to believe this, Renee said, her voice buzzing with excitement. Giselle isn't just an accountant. She used to work as a freelance electronic notary and loan processor. She has access to the back end of the verification software. It clicked. That was how they did it. That was how they bypassed the security checks for the loan. Giselle did not just hold the money. She forged the keys. We do not attack her publicly. Sloane decided. We subpoena her transaction logs and her notary journal. If we catch her falsifying records, she loses her license and goes to jail. She will flip on Miles in a heartbeat to save herself. That night, Miles tried one last maneuver. An email landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Thinking of us. I know things are messy right now, Harper. But I was thinking about that trip we took to Cabo. We were good then. Can't we just agree that we both made mistakes? I just want us to be okay." I read it twice. It sounded nostalgic. But I saw the trap. He wanted me to reply with a yes. He wanted me to admit to mistakes in writing so he could show it to a judge and say, "See, she admits she was at fault too." I moved the email to the evidence folder without replying. I spent the rest of the night preparing for the mediation scheduled for the next morning. I organized my binders with colored tabs: blue for financial fraud, red for harassment, yellow for witness testimony. I charged the batteries for the video camera. I printed the IP trace logs. I looked at the corner of the living room. Miles's old suitcase was still there, where I had shoved it days ago. I realized then that the grief was gone. I was not a wife preparing to argue with her husband. I was a prosecutor preparing to close a file. I was not going to mediation to negotiate. I was going to deliver a verdict. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor wax. Miles sat across the long table wearing his best navy suit, the one I had bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. He was putting on a performance worthy of an Academy Award, slouching slightly to appear diminished, casting nervous glances at the mediator as if he were the victim of a volatile, unreasonable wife. His lawyer, a man who clearly charged by the hour, opened the session with a list of demands that was so detached from reality it was almost impressive. My client is requesting temporary spousal support to maintain his standard of living, the lawyer stated, adjusting his glasses. He is also seeking an equitable division of the marital home, citing his contributions to its maintenance. Miles looked at me. He offered a small, sad smile, the kind that said he forgave me for my outbursts. He was waiting for me to crack. He was waiting for me to yell. I did not make a sound. Sloane did not argue. She simply lifted the heavy black binder we had assembled and dropped it onto the center of the table. Thud. The sound was heavy and final, like a gavel striking wood. "We are not here to negotiate support," Sloane said, her voice ice cold. "We are here to offer your client a chance to avoid a felony indictment." She flipped the binder open. Tab, a harassment of Ms. Tessa Linwood. Tab B, attempted bribery of Mr. Graham Pierce. Tab C, tortious interference with Harper's employment, traced directly to the IP address of Mrs. Martha Rourke. Miles stiffened. His sad smile vanished. Sloane projected an image onto the wall monitor. It was the side-by-side comparison of my digital signature from the iPad insurance form and the signature on the loan documents. Tab D, Sloane continued. Identity theft and forgery. The pixel match is absolute. And here is the real estate listing agreement you hid in your notebook, along with the call log from the realtor confirming you tried to sell a house you do not own to a cash buyer. That is all circumstantial, Miles stammered, his voice rising. I was just trying to manage our assets. Sit down. Miles, Sloane commanded. I am not finished. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, the banking log from yesterday. You attempted to wire $42,000 to an account labeled GF Escrow immediately before the title freeze went into effect. Sloane looked him dead in the eyes. We know who GF is. It is not just a girlfriend. It stands for Giselle Frost Escrow. We subpoenaed her notary journals this morning. We know she is the one who notarized the fraudulent loan documents without Harper present. That makes this a conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The room went dead silent. Miles's lawyer picked up the document, his hands shaking slightly. He looked at Miles with realized horror. This was no longer a divorce case. It was a criminal defense case. And he was not a criminal defense attorney. And finally, Sloane said, sliding Dean's signed affidavit across the table, we have a sworn statement from your father detailing your history of forgery and financial deception. The pattern is established. Miles turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. He looked at his lawyer for help, but the man had physically distanced himself, pushing his chair back inches from the table. Sloane laid out the settlement agreement. Here is the deal. Harper keeps the house. Harper keeps 100% of her retirement. You assume full liability for the fraudulent loan. You agree to a permanent restraining order for Harper and Tessa, and the GF channel is frozen pending a fraud investigation. If you sign this right now, Sloane said, capping her pen, we seal the binder. If you hesitate, even for a minute, I walk this binder down the street to the district attorney's office. Miles looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. His eyes were filled with a pure, toxic hatred. He realized he was not the smartest man in the room. He was just a thief who had been caught. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed his name. I did not feel triumph. I felt the immense relief of a weight being lifted off my chest. "We are done," I said. I stood up and walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. I pulled out my phone and sent a single email to Sloan confirming the end of representation, which triggered the final block on all my communication channels. As I stepped out into the cool morning air, the heavy door of the office building swung shut behind me. Click. It sounded just like a lock. I wasn't locking myself in. I was locking the chaos out. I had ended him fast. Thank you so much for listening to my story and walking this journey with me. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to hear your thoughts on how I handled Miles. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story.